guess it's time to change the world.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another Backlot Banter movie review. My name is Tucker Hazel. Today, I am joined by my dark, nutty, and absolutely insane co-host, Tanner Dykstra, and today we're here to talk about Wonka. This movie's actually been pretty anticipated by some people we know, and we have been not that excited about it. We've been seeing the trailers for a long time, like, this is kind of a thing, we'll go and see it begrudgingly, because we go and see everything. But we have now seen the movie, and we're here to give you our deep, critical analysis of this confectionery film. Directed by Paul King, starring Timothee Chalamet and a bunch of other nonsense people. We want to hear your thoughts on Wonka, though. So, of course, you can leave comments, you can join Discords, you can like and subscribe, do all of that. But Tanner, we have seen Wonka with our own very eyes.
I couldn't agree more.
How did it strike you, my good fellow?
So Tucker, you mentioned we've seen the trailer a couple of times, and I was getting, I think a lot of people were getting some weird vibes from the trailers, like, oh, what is Wonka really? But as with everything, Tucker, I try to go in with a clean slate, a clean mind, an open mind, and that opened mind has brought you and you, dear viewer, this thought: Wonka's all right, like it's okay. It's, I think, largely pretty solid. It goes for this earnestness that I admire. That's its goal. And I think it succeeds.
Style. That's the house style.
Exactly. It's Paul King's whole thing. And some might say it doesn't necessarily work for a film that's maybe supposed to be a prequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the Gene Wilder version, since that does have a bit of a dark edge to it. But regardless, I felt that Wonka on its own worked solidly, and sometimes maybe overstepped or overstayed its welcome. But we'll get into all that in due time.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting movie. I think it is good. Not for me. It's certainly in places, but I think there are places where it's very high quality and places where it's surprisingly low quality. And I certainly want to talk about that because I think there are three levels to talk about this movie on. Number one is sort of the high concept level of the general plot story of Willy Wonka going to a city and starting a chocolate foundation and battling the corruption and the corporate nonsense and helping these people. And I think that's a pretty compelling idea for
the needy beating the greedy.
Yes. Sure, they really make sure that you know that that's the theme of the film.
Yes.
And I think that's a reasonably compelling story for this movie, and that's one area we'll definitely praise it, and we'll get into that. Number two, the other area where I think it works is in the finer details. I think there's a lot of little bits and bobs going on in the background, little hints and things of whimsy that I thought were very, very clever. Great use of practical effects, great use of special effects. I think it looks very good visually. I love the color palette. Production design's all fantastic. But then in the middle, and this is the most of the experience watching the film, I think is where it a little bit falters. The dialogue, the plot, the way that it's paced. For me, some of the musical numbers. I think that on a moment-to-moment basis, there are a lot of things that you can kind of criticize, be like, that line didn't really quite land. When you think about the plot and like the way that things tie together, like, oh, man, maybe there's too much going on, and they kind of forget a few things, and things don't go.
I would agree. Yes,
but it is a good time. It has a great overarching plot, a unique overarching plot. It has a lot of care into the finer details. But I do think that it is an imperfect film, and I think that with a tighter script and a little bit less crazy nonsense going on, it could have felt a little more focused and streamlined. But instead, it's kind of an explosion of color. It's like a firecracker.
Kind of like the poster that really ugly poster that they have. Just an explosion of color and
ideas and characters.
Let's talk about the title character, Tucker. Let's talk about William Wonka, Willard Wonka. His God-given name.
Yeah, I guess that. Yeah, there are some people call that.
Timothee Chalamet was cast in this role a while ago, and much anticipated as like maybe the premier up-and-coming movie star of like Gen Z, as
he's
X.
Not younger than us.
Why? He's 27. Yeah, he's 27. So, but like this is a very interesting step for him. It's a musical. He's taking on this iconic role, and where does he take it? I think he's solid in the role of Willy Wonka. Like, it's a film that is a musical of, as I mentioned, it's a film that asks him to sing, and he's a good singer. He's not an insanely good singer. Like, he's not known for that, and you can tell in the musical numbers, but they also don't auto-tune him to garbage. Okay, He's putting some heart and soul into this. He's using his like lanky sort of physique to dance it up a little bit, and that's always fun to see. And he does have, as people have noted, this innate charisma and like boyish wonder to him that makes him very very fun to watch, especially when he's putting on these airs of being like a fish out of water, sort of like, oh shucks, very positive kind of guy who's experiencing this like Dickensian sort of very Charles Dickens inspired world for the first time, full of orphans and greedy people who are looking to take advantage of you and so on and so forth. And so he sells the wonderment, he sells the musical numbers, he even sells the sparse emotional moments that he gets, and I think that's an issue. That's an issue here, is that we don't get a lot of like true characterization of Willy Wonka outside of him being like, oh, you watch the trailer and you understand what Willy Wonka is.
Wacky, and he has heart
for 95% of the movie. That's what he's doing, and he's good at it.
He's solid. I think that the moments that work for me work really well. You can see that his charisma does shine through, and I think that he has great rapport with a lot of the other characters. But I also feel that whether it's Timothee Chalamet taking things in this direction or Paul King directing it, I think that he takes the kookiness of Willy Wonka maybe a little bit too far to have him be like truly endearing. Like sometimes he'll say a line and he'll make a face like this, and I'm like, you're playing this up. Like it doesn't feel like a genuine kookiness. It feels like, hey Timmy, turn it up to 11 in this moment, so the punchline really lands, and it usually ends up undercutting whatever the moment of comedy is. Because I'm like,
joke was
that doesn't feel like Willy Wonka came up with that. It feels like a script and a punchline, and we're directing it to try to knock it up a few notches. And it's like, that feels fake.
I think there are a lot of elements of this film that feel like that, and that's what I meant in my opening statement when I was like, at times it oversteps or overstays. I think it's especially certain supporting cast members don't feel like they match exactly what the right tenor of this movie is, because it kind of ebbs and flows in between like, okay, this is fun, I'm on board with Wonka, you got me, and
tone it down a little bit. No, absolutely.
Let's reel it in a little bit.
The other big problem with me for Willy Wonka as a character, as the protagonist of this film, is that he doesn't learn anything and he doesn't change. The one thing that comes by the end of the film that's like, hey, this is... I mean, there are a couple like morals of the story, I guess. Like protect yourself and work for yourself, and like there's a bunch of different like sort of other things we can get into. But the one thing it lands on at the end is, it's not the chocolate that matters; it's the people you share it with. And I'm like, Willy Wonka has never had a problem with that. He loves sharing stuff with people. That is his entire thing. And so when he reads this off this little card that comes from his mother, I'm like, that's not a reveal. That doesn't teach him anything. Exactly. What are you doing?
Tucker, this is Tucker, I totally agree. And I was tracking this in the theater. I was like, what is Willy Wonka's character arc here? Like, if he's meant to be this like affable guy, this affable main character, and people are supposed to learn things from him, I understand that. But we also do like a 10-minute chunk in like the second to third act where he's like, maybe I don't want to follow my dreams anymore. And then the end, it is literally like, I check my watch around when it started and around when it stopped. It's like, okay, that took about 10 minutes for him to be like, no, actually, I do want to follow my dreams. So I was like,
that actually we're kind of getting to like the spoiler territory of this, but I think it's important to sort of break down why this movie on a plot level sort of fails in certain areas, because that moment that is supposed to be his like, okay, actually, I do want to commit myself to this, and the people that I already cared about, I actually still do care about, even though I kind of turn on them a little bit. But that doesn't come from a moment of him having a personal realization. He comes to learn something about Noodle, the child character in this film, that is not set up very well, does not pay off very well, and doesn't have any personal relevance to him. And so when he's like, oh, actually Noodle has like a family fortune thing, maybe... that's what causes him to go back. And so that's not even him learning from his mistake or have a changing of heart in terms of emotion. He just learns a new piece of the detail by basically accident. And then he goes back on his change of heart, and it feels a little bit like plot heavy. Like, oh, we need to insert something in here. But I think that becomes a problem when you're right. Like, people are supposed to learn things from him, but what's his character flaw? Like, what's the thing that I know what drives Willy Wonka, but he's just a good guy that kind of messes up once. That's maybe like the
Well, no, not even. I mean, the spoilers for Wonka, I guess. The moment that like causes the whole, dark night of the heart or whatever you want to call it is his chocolate gets poisoned. He didn't do anything. Like he didn't mess up. Like that could be something where you're like, Willy Wonka needs to learn to maybe. That's not a great lesson for the movie, but like sometimes he can take his silliness and his kookiness and his zany candy a little bit too far, and he should tell people when he's going to put like weird hair growy serum in his chocolate. But no,
also that comes out of nowhere.
It's poisoned
we didn't know
by
that there was hair growy stuff. We didn't know that. What's Mrs. Scrubbit? We didn't know Mrs. Scrubbit knew anything about that she had access to this chocolate. Like this whole thing comes out of nowhere and feels really ham-fisted and certainly hampers the possibility of there being a compelling character arc or character moment for Willy Wonka that just ends up never coming because it's plot motivations and not character motivations that end up stirring along these multiple occurrences.
Tucker, should we talk supporting cast?
Huge supporting cast here.
We do. So the title role, or the premier supporter of Willy Wonka in this is someone who we already mentioned, the character of Noodle, as portrayed by Carah Lane, who is this, very much like a Charles Dickens, Oliver Twist style orphan who is basically forced into indentured servitude in a wash house by Mrs. Scrubbit, or Olivia Coleman. And she's good. She's fine. I like her. I think she's got a good interplay with Timothee Chalamet or Willy Wonka, in that, she's sort of, she's jaded, I guess, by her whole living situation, and Willy Wonka is the opposite of jaded. He couldn't be
creativity and wonder to her life.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's fun to see that interplay of her being like, Willy Wonka, this stuff is ridiculous. You can't go in there and milk a giraffe. And he's like, oh, just watch me go. And he does it. And then he does a little dance and he sings a little song and he clicks his heels and he tips his top hat. So I do like their interplay. And I think she's good. She's given a couple of singing moments as well, and she's quite good at that too.
Yeah, I think that I like their bond and the role that she plays in the story a lot better in concept than I do in execution, because I think that the idea of having Willy Wonka have kind of a child protege and be inspiring in the heart of a child, which is something that the original movie definitely had, but bringing that back here and having her be the one that needs to learn to incorporate some whimsy into her life, I think that does work very well on a story level. I think that Carah Lane is good, but I think that she does fall into this child acting trap that happens occasionally where it's like she feels like she's on like a Nickelodeon show where she's just like delivering the lines with like 10% too much energy from like you're not selling this.
She's putting too much spin on it. She's putting too much spin on the fastball.
And she's also unfortunately put into this situation where she ends up becoming a big problem of this script of this film, where she explains everything a second time, where something will happen and she's no, that happened because of this thing, and you don't get it, Willy Wonka. And he's like, but it makes the script feel a little bit cyclical and repetitive because she often ends up not reacting like logically to things, or like it doesn't make sense the way she reacts to them. She just like reacts to them on like a plot or like re-explaining level. I mean, that also plays a little bit to the humor, as I want to get into a little bit. But she also has this background plot line that was kind of what I was talking about earlier, where she is related to one of the villains, Slughorn, in a connection of plot threads and background details that not only barely make sense in the context of what's happening on screen, but by the end of the film do not pay off in any particular way. She is the daughter of the dead brother of Slugworth. You're right. Yeah, you're right. Slugworth. So then she's actually kind of the heir to the Slugworth family fortune. But her mother works in a library, which is part of her dream. So, okay, I understand that. But that has nothing to do with the chocolate thing. And there's this whole thing with the ring, which is really dumb, which is, she was called Noodle because it's an N, but actually it's a Z. And isn't that crazy that it was a Z? Why did it have to be a Z? That's not a reveal. That doesn't change anything. That barely even makes any sense. Why did Mrs. Scrubbit let her keep the ring? she's greedy. It was a baby that had the ring with it. Why she let her keep the ring?
Uh-huh.
Like, there are all of these little things that, like, when you think about it, it's like, that's not really a reveal. It doesn't add anything to the texture of the film. What it does is give Noodle a happy ending, which is great. Fine. I want Noodle to have a happy ending. But on a plot level, there are a lot of different loopholes and fiery hoops you have to jump through in order to, like, land in this place that ultimately ends up being very shaky.
Yeah, that's fair. And like ultimately, Tucker, are people going to Wonka for the plot? I don't know. I don't know. Tucker's going to Wonka for the plot. The Plonka.
Yes.
But like I want to shout out some other some of these other supporting characters here. You have Keegan Michael Key as the chief of police. And his whole running bit is that he loves chocolate and he gets fat.
And he gets fat, and that joke never
they
stops.
They do like a razzmatazz sort of musical number about his sweet tooth.
That's actually a fun
and I want to get to the it is, yeah. I want to get to the musical numbers too. But just to rattle off some more people here. Olivia Coleman as Mrs. Scrubbit. She's good. She totally understands like the whole mean, overbearing,
well, I think her and
headmistress kind of thing.
And Tom Davis as Bleacher, I think they perfectly sell like my vision of what these characters should be acting like. Is they're fully committed to the bit, and I think most of their jokes land, and they're really incorporated with their makeup and their costume design and everything. And it feels like a genuine kind of kookiness that takes it just the right amount of too far, to where they're cartoonishly hateable villains, but they're giving genuinely good performances with funny accents, and like that really sells it for me too. So where, because Timothee Chalamet as Wonka is kind of looks just exactly like Timothee Chalamet and kind of ebbs and flows in terms of how like far he's taking his performance, they I think settle very nicely into this is the kooky, cartoonish tone that this movie goes for. Yes. And I think another actor that sells that perfectly, I think my favorite supporting performance in the film, is Paterson Joseph as Slugworth. I think he was a phenomenal villain. I mean, the way that he's selling his lines and like sneering at the camera and like wringing his hands. I thought he was absolutely fantastic.
There's a moment where we talked about Noodle's mother thing already, where they ask like, what was her name? What was my mother's name? He's like, I actually don't remember. I must have slipped my mind. And he just like he sells like the boo that kind of evil very well. Although I do have to bring out his two lackeys, I guess, or the other members of the chocolate cartel. Matt Lucas as Prodnose, and then I don't know. Rich Fulcher.
Matthew Bateman.
Matthew Bateman. Sorry, yeah. I don't like them.
No, I didn't like them either.
I think they are. I think they are
film, easily.
Yes, they are some of the people who I feel fall victim to this thing of like they don't get the tone that the film is going for, whereas people like Olivia Coleman or Paterson Joseph or Tom Davis do. And so I also want to point out, why is Prodnose, the guy with the glasses, why does he look so much like Hitler? He looks a lot like Hitler, doesn't he?
I guess
like
he
exactly
does,
like Hitler.
Yeah.
I was very like, that's really odd, isn't it? I don't know.
But also his recurring joke is another part of the script that really frustrated me in terms of even within the comedy, and this is where the comedy ends up failing for me a lot of the time, is it's a lot of, that just happened kind of comedy. We do the joke, and then we gotta like pause, make sure that we know it was funny, have someone explain it a little bit, and then like kind of putter out of the comedic beat.
The modern SNL type of comedy that I think they feel like they're on like an SNL skit that you would see probably like tomorrow night. We're recording this on a Friday. But yeah, I was like, okay, they just don't quite get it, which is unfortunate because Paterson Joseph definitely does. Yeah. Tucker, one other person that we need to talk about. Well, two other people. One person that's very important. Hugh Grant. As the Oompa Loompa.
Oompa Loompa. His character's name is actually like Shorty Pants, I believe, is the
Shorty Pants, but he also says it's Lofty.
Yeah, but that was
at one
a
point.
lie.
So yeah, it was a lie. Hugh Grant said that he hated doing this, and I can understand why. He was clearly, I would venture a guess, never on set with another actor.
Absolutely not. No way in hell.
He's also not in the movie a whole lot.
And that, I think, is the worst part of this. I think he's kind of fun as Oompa Loompa. It's terrible that he didn't like working on it. It's terrible that he wasn't on the set to work with people. But when he's doing his jokes, I think most of his humor lands. but he also feels very shoehorned in to have another thing that you recognize from the other movies. His plot line about Wonka stealing his chocolate and then needing to be paid back 1,000-fold barely makes any sense.
That's very we need an Oompa Loompa in the story. So it totally does feel like they got studio notes of, can we put an Oompa Loompa in this? Because Oompa Loompas are a thing from Willy Wonka.
Include him for
and they're like,
5 minutes,
I suppose we can.
Maybe. And I think that's the reason that I'm so frustrated by Hugh Grant not enjoying doing this performance, even though I think it does turn out well when he's on screen, is he's not on screen in enough of it and not tied in deep enough to the plot, though he also ends up becoming like the not Damon Ex Machina, that's a game. Deus Ex Machina by the end, where he just saves Willy Wonka from drowning in chocolate. It's like, oh, okay. But he's not in the movie enough to be like, oh, that's why this character was included. He doesn't have a consistent enough bond. He doesn't show up until like an hour and 45 minutes into the movie. It's a long
really
time. Crazy.
Quick thing, also want to mention Sally Hawkins, probably like 2 minutes of screen time. Why couldn't she be in Paddington in Peru? I put that question to you, the audience. Anyway,
you can shoot those two movies at the same time.
Rowan Atkinson, also not in enough of the movie, I might add, for as good as he's in. For as good as he is. Because it's Rowan Atkinson. He's like a legend of the comedy game, of like the slapstick game here. And he's playing a cardinal, so that opens up the door for a lot of jokes.
And I think he does get the best. Some good jokes when it comes. I think actually every bit of Rowan Atkinson's humor really works. I love him picking up the phone during the funeral. It's so funny. He's like, "Hello."
That's my favorite one-liner of the entire film. Hello, pulpit.
Yeah. and his bit about like being bribed with chocolate in the confessional booth is great. While he's walking down the aisle of 500 chocolate obsessed monks, and they're all like singing in the background, but they're singing like yes, and like, oh, I love chocolate, and like there's a lot of good humor in that, and I think that it also ties very nicely in with the production design of this, because I think that the church and the lair for the villains and the big cathedral sort of mall area, kind of like a Hugo-esque place that all the chocolate shops are put in, and Olivia Coleman's crazy factory. I think there are some really, really great production design here. I think that's one of the clear highlights.
I think so too. Yeah. Other humorous things that I found, because we already talked on like some of it doesn't work, some of it like is kind of too much pushing on like, do you get it? You get the joke? Let's explain the joke to you for a second. But like, Willy Wonka has one-liners. There's the moment where the chocolate mafia or the chocolate cartel say they don't like his chocolate. And he's like, "There it is, folks, a ringing endorsement." Like, what? There's also the moment where Noodle tells him that she hasn't had chocolate before, and he goes, "What?"
he like goes.
I like that.
He like this little weird mumble. That there are some good moments of comedy in that. I think my favorite moment of physical and writing and timing comedy comes from when they give the zoo guard the chocolate makes you drunk for the first time.
That's good too.
And it's presented through this shot reverse shot of Willy Wonka explaining what the chocolate does step by step. And there's like 8 steps or something like that. Intercut with the guard acting out A Night on the
Experiencing,
Town.
It's like a silhouette of the guard.
And it's really clever. I think it's done really well timing wise. And so there are some moments of comedy in here that I think are like genuinely very, very good. But those are for me, unfortunately.
And there's a little setup and payoff with another character experiencing that towards the end as well. Sorry, Tucker, what were you going to transition into there?
Unfortunately, it doesn't. I think it misses more than it hits.
Sure.
Which again comes to, I feel like they explain a lot of the jokes too much. Some of the characters and their performances and the line delivery, I don't think quite lands. But yeah, anything else you want to talk about here? Oh, music. Maybe.
Musical numbers. I felt like they're kind of subpar, frankly. Like, they're not bad. There's no one musical number in this film that I'd say is a bad one, but they all kind of feel like they're operating at a low hum for me. I'm a musical guy, and especially whenever I watch a musical, I'm like, that's the one. That's the one that's my favorite. That's the one I'm going to look up on YouTube later and rewatch. And it's typically like a high-tempo, really fun song that I end up revisiting and really enjoying. And there are a number of high-tempo songs in this film that none of which stick out to me.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed by that. There's, they're varied. Like there's but I think they kind of all end up sort of blending together for me, sadly, because I'm like, what's the... I was also trying to find like what's the Wonka musical number, like the one they might submit to the Oscars, for example.
I have
and I was like,
I have a guess because it's my clear favorite from this, and it's also the only song they play twice in this film, which is "A World of Your Own," which is the one that plays over him opening the chocolate shop for the first time. I think that is not only the most visually inventive of all the sequences, it's also the one that invokes the songs of the original movie the most. And it's also the one they play over the credits, and it was also easily my favorite of all these in terms of the hummability of it and the way that the lyrics played into what was going on screen. I thought that was probably my favorite sequence in the entire film, and it's the one again that they play over the credits again. So I'm like, I think they know that this is the one.
That's the one. That's the one they're selling. Okay. But there's the one that I think the audio or like on-set video leaked of the opening one where it's Hat Full of Dreams or whatever.
Yeah.
That one's kind of catchy.
It's clever. I like that one sort of paces out through him like losing his money over the course of the day.
Yeah, he loses. Fun. Oh, the running bit, the bit of the kid who keeps trying to shine his shoes. And that's funny too.
Like, get away from me.
Yeah, that's good. And I don't need to recap everything, but I would just say, like, I think through the course of this conversation, Tucker, we've sort of like brought up things like, oh, that was a really funny moment that I quite enjoyed, or and that moment didn't work, or this setup and payoff didn't work, or and we got into the plot issues and everything. So I think it's a very conflicted film for me at the end of the day. And I want you to give your score first.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go like a 6.3 out of 10. I think it's good. I think it's above average movie that clearly has care putting it into places, but it does scream in areas of a studio stepping in and being like, hey, child character needs to explain things so child character makes sense in the plot, and we gotta have a payoff for this, and let's write some things kind of hastily that don't tie together. That I think is the biggest issue with this film is a choppy script and choppy humor placed on top of really good production design, okay music. Like it hits high in some places, and I think in most areas it's like this is okay, kind of shaky in places.
I'll go similar. I'll go like a 6.2, I guess, or a 6.1. I'll go 6.2 out of 10. And yeah, I think we kind of hit on everything. Is like, yeah, I mean, like I'm sitting in the theater, Tucker. I'm having a solid time, but recall on this thing, sort of talking about it and analyzing it a little bit and taking a bit of a critical eye to it, it does falter more often than not.
It's kind of like a sugar rush. Sugar crash.
It is kind of like a sugar rush. And Warner Brothers has another musical opening in 10 days.
What is up with that? That's crazy.
Fun stuff.
But thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching this review, and we will be back to review the other big movies of this holiday season. Wonka is just the beginning. Mind like a sponge trap.
You hear that?
It's picking it up like every 4.
It knows. It knows what's up.
Ow.
Why'd you do that?
I was seeing if it would pick it up.
It didn't. You did it for no reason.
Fuck. No.
You fool! You've struck yourself on the head for no comedic effect.